If you would, open up to Matthew chapter 24. Excuse me. We'll kick off in verse 42. Jesus is going to go into 5 different parables to teach us to be watchful and to be faithful while we're being watchful. 42, therefore keep watch, because you do not know on what day your Lord will come. But understand this, if the owner of the house had known at what time of night the thief was coming, he would have kept watch and would not have left his house broken into. So also you must be ready, because the Son of Man will come in an hour when you do not expect him. I know Kevin's and Lisa are gone, but anybody ever been robbed, had your house broken into? Can you relate to what this is saying? If you knew when they were going to break into it, you would have been ready, right? Wouldn't have happened. But it comes at an unexpected time. So this is one of the parables that Jesus is talking about. You need to be ready. Verse 45, who then is the faithful and wise servant whom the master has put in charge of his servants in his household and gave them their food at the proper time? It will be good for the servant whose master finds him doing so when he returns. I tell you the truth, he will put him in charge of all his possessions. But suppose that a servant is wicked and says to himself, my master is staying a long time. And he then begins to beat his fellow servants and eat and drink with drunkards. The master of that servant will come on a day when he does not expect him, at an hour he is not aware of. He will cut him to pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. So he talks about 2 different scenarios there, right? You got a servant that's faithful, does what he's supposed to do. When his master returns and he's doing what he's supposed to do, does he get less or more responsibility? More. And then he talks about there's a wicked servant, right? He's like, my master's not coming for a long time, so I'm going to do what I want to please myself. And it says, your master's going to show up on a day you don't expect it. And a few weeks ago, Jesus was given the woes to the Pharisee, if you remember that. And what adjective did he use? He said, you what? Hypocrites, right? Brood of vipers, hypocrites. Notice what he says here. It says, when the master shows up and you're being wicked, you're going to be cut into pieces and assigned a place with who? The hypocrites. And where are the hypocrites at? What's going on with teeth? There's weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, do you think maybe some of the Pharisees are listening to Jesus that he gave the woes to? And he's talking about where the hypocrites are going to go. Doesn't sound like a pleasant place, does it? Weeping and gnashing of teeth. And he continues on. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight the cry rang out, here's the bridegroom, come to meet him. Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out. No, they replied, there may not be enough for both of us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Sir," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "I tell you the truth, I don't know you. Therefore keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." I remember when I was young, in Bible school, that the girls made their little lamps, cut out a little cardboard deal, and they made the boys be like part of the wedding party. But this is stuck in my mind for quite some time, just because of that. So, how do you think the 5 that were unprepared felt when the door wasn't open for them? Think they were devastated? They've been waiting all day for this, right? Even though they were waiting, Jesus says they weren't what? Prepared. Have you ever thought about that? Even though they were waiting for the bridegroom, they weren't prepared. So can you wait for Jesus but not be prepared? Let that sink in. There's a lot of people in the world in that situation right now, right? So it says to be prepared. With this door shut, they were trying to get in. What was the reply from the gatekeeper? "I don't know you," right? And he didn't open it. And this brings back some imagery to me, basically, about when God shut the door on the ark, right? Nobody else was getting in, right? They weren't prepared. So, once you come to this point in time in your life, there's nothing else you can do about it, right? If you're not prepared for Jesus, if you're not prepared to meet him, if you're not prepared when he comes back, it's over with. You're in the situation you're in, and you can't change that circumstance. When you pass away, yeah, that's when some will meet him. So, verse 14. "Again, it will be like a man going on a journey, who called his servants and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents of money, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who received the 5 talents went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 more. So also the one with the 2 talents gained 2 more. But the man who had received the 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of the servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who received 5 talents brought the other 5. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 5 talents. See, I've gained 5 more.' His master replied, 'Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful with a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.' The man with the 2 talents also came. 'Master,' he said, 'you entrusted me with 2 talents. See, I've gained 2 more.' The master replied, 'Well done, and good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in a few things. I'll put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness.'" So those 2 servants right there mirror what the faithful servant was told, right? You've been faithful. I'm going to give you what? I'll bless you with more. It says he entrusted them each according to their what? Ability. He knew what they could do, right? And he entrusted them with what he knew they could do. 2 were faithful. I would guarantee, maybe, hopefully 100% of y'all in here know this parable. We come to the last fella. And it said what did he do with his? He dug a what? And I wondered if he was scared to death somebody was going to steal that or not, if he just buried it in the ground. Verse 24, then the man who had received the 1 talent came. Master, he said, I knew you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went off and hid your talent in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. So this guy didn't put very much effort into what was entrusted to him based on his ability, right? Isn't that what we can conclude? He said, I'm entrusting you with this 1 talent based on your ability. And he went far below expectations, right? Just put it hole in the ground and just left it there till the master came back and said, here's your talent back.
Translate that 1 talent to the gospel, knowledge of it, and what it is. That 1 talent. Everybody that's in here right now has the most valuable talent. And he had the most valuable talent. And he put it in the hole in the ground.
If you didn't hear Terry, he's talking about the most valuable talent we have is the gospel. And he said that guy had the most valuable talent, and he hid it in the ground. Jesus talks about a lamp putting out light. And what does he say? We know the little kid song, right? Hide it. Oh no. So the question is, God knows our abilities in serving him. Which of these 3 are we? You'll have to answer that question for yourself. Did you dig the hole and just walk off and not do anything? Have you been faithful and doubled what God entrusted you with? So that's what the first 2 did. And the servant came up and said, what? I know you're a what? An easy master? A hard master. And I think that probably infuriated the master even more, because let's read on. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant, you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered. Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers so that when I return, I would have received it back with the interest. Take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has will be given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. And throw that worthless servant outside into the darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Yes, David. Yeah. Yeah, so it comes down to day in, day out. Are you faithful or lazy? What have you done? Yeah, yeah, yeah. What's the effort and what's the results? Yes, Toby. So Toby said there's also a warning in here about being fearful. And this guy feared so much that he did what? Pretty much nothing, right? So, yeah, yeah, exactly right. And again, where does he talk about this? The wicked servant going to some place, right? Throw him outside where? Where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth. So he's used that phrase again. Previously, he said it's where the hypocrites are going. The hypocrites and the wicked servant are going to be in this place. It's getting crowded. All right. Yes, David. Yeah. That's a scary thought, right? Some people think they're serving, they're doing the right things, and that's what kind of goes back to you may be waiting for the bridegroom, but are you prepared? Have you done the things that are required of you to be at that wedding feast, right? To be in heaven. Uh, that's going to be the saddest thing to hear on Judgment Day, right? Depart from me. I know you what? Not. The sheep and the goats, right? There's going to be a culling that day. So if you're in the audience, I always try to go back to that, whether if you're a Pharisee, you're an apostle, or you're just an everyday person. What do you think is resonating with them as he goes through these parables? Trying to think where they fit in. Do they certainly understand a master and a servant back during this time? I wonder if they ever saw a wicked servant be punished. I wonder if they ever saw a faithful servant be rewarded. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, so the point Lisa was pulling out is she talked about the foolish virgin. She's like, it doesn't say in here, it's a parable, but, do you think they came up with excuses why they should have got to go in and talking about that later? And, the guy that gave the one talent back, he gave an excuse of why he did what he did. So, on the day of judgment, do you think people will be trying to make excuses? Rationalize it in our minds, can't we? A lot of times, a lot of different situations. But if we go back to what David pulled out, what are you doing day in, day out to serve the God of the Bible? Because Jesus has told these people before, God desires what? Mercy, not sacrifices. He's getting back to telling them what's important in the law, to love God, to love people. Yes, David. Yeah. Isn't that what Paul wrote a lot about? Is you need to be maturing, but some of you need to go back to milk, right? So are you maturing in your faith? Are you just keeping it at one talent and not doing anything else in your faith? So a lot of things to digest in these five parables about being watchful and faithful. All right. We'll continue on in Matthew chapter 25, starting verse 31. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right hand and the goats on his left. The king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me." So here he is talking to the people about Judgment Day, right? And we just talked about it a few minutes ago. He's going to separate what? Sheep from the goats. Sheep go on what side? Is that a good side? The goats are going to go where? Left side. And he's going to say to those on the right, "Come who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance." Isn't that going to be awesome to hear? And this kingdom's been prepared for how long? Since the creation of the world. And he goes on about, I was hungry, I was thirsty, needed clothes, and I was in prison. So that gets back to what Jesus was talking about in the commandments, right? Love the Lord your God. And then the second, what? Love your neighbor as yourself. And he said, with these two, what does it do? Sums up the law and the what? Prophets. So the sheep are practicing this, and they were prepared. Verse 37, then the righteous will answer him, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When do you see a stranger, invite him in? We see you, a stranger, invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you. When did we see you sick or in prison and go visit you?" The king will reply, "I tell you the truth, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me." And we can go back to the story of the Good Samaritan. So we got 2 goats and 1 sheep in that story, right? If we tie it to what is said right here. The 2 that were supposed to be religious, Jewish, of course, walked on by, probably justified everything in their minds. And the Samaritan stopped and he did the neighbor thing, right? And Jesus is saying, if you do it for the least of them, you've done it to who? To me, to Jesus. Verse 41, then he will say to those on his left, depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels. Does that sound like a pleasant place? Does that sound like the group you want to be with? Verse 42, for I was hungry and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison and you did not look after me. They also will answer, Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty or a stranger or needing clothes or sick or in prison and did not help you? So there it goes back, Lisa, to some of that excuse, like, when did we see you? He will reply, tell you the truth, whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me. Have you ever thought about every time you miss an opportunity to do something, that we're not doing it to Jesus? Who in here would feed Jesus? Who in here would feed Jesus? Who would give him clothes if he needed it? Who would do all these things? And he's saying if you don't do it to the least, you're not doing it to him. Do we think about that when we miss those opportunities? So he said the extreme of that is if you look at Saul when he's on the road to Tarsus and Jesus appears to him, he didn't say, why are you persecuting my people? He said, why are you persecuting who? Jesus. Verse 46, then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life. Now, if we get back to the crowd, what do you think are some of the thoughts they may be having? If you're hearing this firsthand, wouldn't you be trying to figure out where you fit in? Just like Judy said. My assumption is the Pharisees think they're the sheep. Jesus gave them woes not too long ago about why they weren't. Two mindsets.
The common man that's listening to Jesus, the rabble, as far as the Pharisees are concerned, they're listening to this and it's pouring conviction into their soul. And they're looking inside themselves to say, what have I done? On the outside, you have the Pharisee that says, I'm good. What more do I need to do? And they just write it off, and they write him off. And they displace God.
Yep. They continue to figure out ways how to get rid of Jesus. But as we've read through this morning, hopefully it's convicting to yourself about where you stand. Yes, Toby.
In the context, it looks like the disciples are just talking to him privately.
Okay. Yes.
One of the underlying things that is in this context is the disciples had gone to Jesus asking for explanation on what he was talking about and everything else. And he's talking again, explaining to his disciples. Made me think of James chapter 2. You know, you see somebody in need, you say, well, be warm and be filled, and you don't do anything. He said, you tell me which one has faith based on what he does.
Mm-hmm.
And which one has faith based upon just what he says. You know, and it's again, it's the doer.
That's right. Supposed to be doers. Supposed to be a participant, not a fan, right? Yes. Yeah. So Jesus is definitely laying out the knowledge we need to get rid of that ignorance. And
We'd like to think he's just talking to all those old Pharisees still.
we do.
His people today.
This still resonates today with us. And that's why I try to ask a lot of questions and get people to think. Where do you fit in these parables? Might have been in multiple roles in different times in your life. Where are you today, and what are you going to commit to going forward? Just like Toby said, there's two things prepared, a kingdom and a fire, right? So which one do you want to join for eternity? So we got time for just a little bit more. We'll continue on in Matthew chapter 26, starting verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, the Passover is 2 days away, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." Then the chief priests and the elders of the people assembled in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and they plotted to arrest Jesus in some sly way and kill him. But not during the feast, they said, or there may be a riot among the people. So Jesus' time here on earth is about to end pretty quickly, right? And they have a plot. They've been plotting for some time and scheming for some time. A lot of their traps have trapped themselves, right? And then it got to a point to where it said, after the last attempt, that nobody dared ask him what? Any more questions. But here they are, still determined to kill him. And again, as I read about the chief priests and the elders and the high priest and the Pharisees, it always brings to mind about, Saul before he was Paul, and the zeal that he had for persecuting the church. And I've said it many times. What did Paul say about his conscience during that time? His conscience was clear. He had a good conscience. He was doing what God wanted him to do. Is exactly what he had in his mind, right? And he found out, and David just talked about a little bit ago, he wasn't persecuting the believers, he was persecuting who? Would you ever want to be accused of that? So we'll continue on next week in Matthew, where we'll look at the Mary's anointing of Jesus for his burial, and some of the things that happened during that. We get a little bit of character. Judas is revealed in that. Yes, Junior.
According to the world, the only hypocrites are people in the church because they're there to point it out when we fall short or sin.
A lot of church members have been labeled hypocrites by the outside world, and it's just like David said, we can't be flawless, right? That's why we got the blood of Jesus Christ. We can be faithful. So, appreciate everybody's comments this morning. Hope you have a great week. I'm enjoying, just like Ivy said to me this morning, I'm enjoying the cooler weather too. So.